Welcome to Strength Chat with your host. That's right, coming at you front and central, the mad scientist himself, myself, Chris Duffin. To my left, I've got Brandon. Yes, the wizard of training.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and to my right, I have Brandon. You're in two places today.
We are everywhere.
Oh, wait, no, we've got a different Brandon. So we're... Brandon Morgan is one of our new coaches here. Well, he's been around us for a while, but we don't even have to play the create a nickname game because we already did this like a while ago, not on the podcast. So we'll just call him Kronk. There's a reason for that. Why do we call you Kronk?
I actually don't even know that myself.
So if you, for those just listening to us, Kronk, that might cue you to the Kronk challenge that we posted on our video. So it was like in about a minute, Brandon.
Wait, I thought that was the guy from Emperor's New Groove.
It
Kronk.
is. It is. It is. Yes.
That's what I thought.
So anyway, the Kronk challenge. Kronk here obviously did it, but it was deadlifting 600 pounds, doing a front flip. Walk over.
Front handspring to a front handspring off of somebody else's back.
To benching 405 for reps, to jumping to a seated 50-something odd inch box jump. So just all one right after another. So, which actually will kind of lead us into today's discussion a little bit, but we'll see if I can get there. I'm a little not doing that great, like mentally today.
Wait, see if you can get there on the Kronk challenge. There's no way.
Oh no, I can't do the Kronk. Well, I can't bench press. But,
you could maybe deadlift it.
And I could. Well, yeah. Okay.
You're not doing the front.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing any of that other stuff. I can do heavy weights and a lot of reps.
Yeah.
That's what I'm good for. But yeah, I had an interesting night. My daughter's into this kicking thing. So, and. Yeah, she was screaming, woke up around midnight last night, and decided that she likes to put her feet against me and kick me when we bring her into our bed. This is my youngest. She's a year and a half. And so last night she decides that she is going to use my face for the kicking. So basically from 12 o'clock till 6 a.m., I was getting kicked in the face. And so around 6 a.m., I finally had this brilliant idea, and I turned around so that my head was at the foot of the bed. So I might have got a little bit of sleep there.
Well, to be fair, your head is a gigantic target. It looks very punchable, too.
She thinks so. And then, so we get up, and she just, I don't know how she's full of energy after, spending the night kicking me. But we get up, and I'm like, hey, do you want to go see your brother and sister? Because, they're in their bedrooms down the hallway. And she goes screaming over to the door and starts karate kicking the door and punching it. And I was telling you this story, and you pointed out that was quite...
that sounds like you.
I might have... Yes. Yeah, I have a problem
like
with
you.
I have a problem with doors, and there's been many doors replaced in the office around here.
No,
So,
literally,
anyway.
there has. Chris is incapable of carrying keys, so he'll chop the door down if he doesn't have his keys and it's locked.
Well, yeah.
That happened. That's a real story.
A few times. We now have electronic locks on the doors, though. So
Yeah, you still did that though once, and then you put a new lock on. There's a new lock on there now.
Well, I don't remember why.
I do. I think you blacked out.
I haven't knocked down a door in this area for I think 2 years, maybe a year and a half.
You're really losing your step there, I think.
I guess so. Anyway, yeah. So I said the Kronk challenge is an interesting kind of carry into today's conversation because it's something that demonstrates athleticism in a number of different fields, and I think that it's a good kind of lead into our guest today.
Well, really quick, because you're known for stupid human tricks.
Yes.
Where's the line drawn between athleticism and stupid human tricks?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Is a one-arm snatch a stupid human trick or an athletic feat?
I don't know.
I think it's a stupid human trick.
We're gonna ask. We're gonna ask our guest.
Let's
today.
get the professional on.
Yeah, we'll get the professional.
Where
on
is
it.
the line of stupid human tricks, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. Like at what point is it just, something skill based you were born with versus something that is, you've worked years and years to accumulate the strength and wherewithal to accomplish it.
None of us know.
Yeah. I do enjoy a one-arm barbell snatch. That's all I can tell you. It's fun to
Would
do.
you stop being rude and introduce our guest?
Okay, fine. Today, we're really excited to have on Dave Lipson of Thundrbro. So Dave is an ex-ball player turned CrossFitter, and he's married into CrossFit too. His wife has won the games in, was it 2016?
2014.
2014.
Yep.
And Dave has a company, Thundrbro, which besides making some really badass wrist Conan-styled wrist wraps, which by the way, those are freaking cool looking.
I gotta get you guys a pair.
Okay, those dropped just like a couple weeks ago, right?
Oh yeah, man, they are so sick. It's like instantly 10% more on any pressing movement.
You don't even have to just put them on. You don't even have to lift the weight. The weights are going to be so intimidated, they're going to lift themselves.
We wore them into the Chinese buffet the other night, and everyone just ran away. They were like, game over.
Dave's got an interesting company. It's focused on hypertrophy, but within the CrossFit arena. And so I think that's a really cool because we have so many people that seem to just get stuck with one mindset, one discipline, and everything outside of that is shit or crap or what. I'm not supposed to. Is this a clean podcast, Andre? Dang. It's a clean podcast, so that word didn't come out.
Yes, we won't be making all that ad money on this one.
That's the curse of the zero-sum gain mindset. Like I'm going to raise my value by reducing your value.
But how did you get? Because that's really not like a focus with a lot of CrossFit type gyms or training methodologies that you see, right? So, where did this all come from?
Well, I mean, first you have to understand, and everyone has their own perceptions of what they think CrossFit is. Just kind of basic going over CrossFit from a very general standpoint. CrossFit is meant to develop a broad spectrum of fitness across a bunch of different types of capacities. So the idea is to develop athletes who are virtuosos, to be able to have an athlete who could enter a local 10K and do respectively and still enter a local powerlifting meet and do respectively. And while this is great, makes athletes very versatile, certainly lends itself to activities outside the gym and sport and life and combat, it's not as specialized as any individual discipline. So, you'll hear catchphrases like our specialty is not specializing, or routine is the enemy, things like that. But basically what we're saying is we want you to be good at everything, not great at any one thing. And that's where CrossFit does develop some hypertrophy to a point, but because of the compromise of skills and drills, it's certainly limited. The same thing with strength, the same thing with endurance, right? But it's general physical preparedness, basically. So where this all came from was really just myself, dude. I mean, I love CrossFit. The idea of competing to be the fittest man or woman on earth is such a challenging task just due to the variety of things you need to try to work on and get good at. But, inevitably after doing this for 10, 15 years, you end up with two issues. The first is just kind of plateau. You stop getting better or the results kind of stop coming at a certain point. And more commonly is just breakdown due to the nature of the really high powered movements and the amount of intensity and training every day. You end up with a lot of degenerative things that start to creep up, even starting with things like hormonal suppression, hypothyroidism, lower testosterone levels, lower growth hormone levels, just being catabolic a lot of the time. And then degenerative things like deterioration of cartilage and shoulders and hips and backs. So, because I love CrossFit so much, I decided that, I'm going to have to change something if I want to keep doing this. And I ended up with multiple injuries. So did my wife, shoulder injuries. I had a couple back surgeries. And, my solution to this was to actually pull back from doing the intense CrossFit workouts as frequently as I was and replace that with just fortifying joints. And this kind of brought me back to the original reason why I ever went into a gym which was to look good and to feel good. And I'm sure you guys, I know Chris, you guys love strength, and I totally get that. I love it too. But if you think back to the first time you picked up a barbell or something like that, you were probably doing something like a bicep curl, looking at the mirror because you wanted to get chicks. And I don't think that ever goes away. So, if the goal of most people is to look good and feel good, then you should look the way you want to look, and you shouldn't be hurt all the time or feeling down on yourself that you can't snatch what you once snatched before. So that we started to integrate hypertrophy training into kind of the CrossFit model, whether it be kind of manipulating the CrossFit workouts or just doing dedicated hypertrophy work with more functional movements, to be able to create an athlete or a ground that is where aesthetics can meet performance. And likewise, we've seen the same thing from the other end of the spectrum, which is the bodybuilding community. For bodybuilders who, want to be more than display models only or be able to express their athleticism, they're very intrigued by CrossFit, but a lot of them are just afraid of getting small. So this is kind of like a middle ground on both ends where we can give CrossFitters more aesthetics and we can give bodybuilders more functionality.
Well, I really like that pairing those worlds together. And, I think, honestly, in any sort of training program, and we do this, like staying in just that one modality, year round, year over year can be detrimental. You've got to spend time in different modes of training and developmental cycles. And that's, I don't know, Brandon, you can probably speak to that a little bit more than me. One thing though I speak to on a number of the podcasts we've been is some of the odd stuff like that, the one arm snatch or the things these odd lifts that I do, and people are like, how does that fit? What's that developing? How's that feeding into your deadlift? And I'm like, it doesn't really. They're like, why are you doing it? Well, because it's fun. I like doing it. That's okay. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing those as I'm prepping for, an event or something like, if you're prepping for the games and you used to be a games athlete, your wife as well, like you're going to have very focused training during that period of time, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Like it's the training actually, although it's preparing for something very general, the preparation is actually very specific. You know exactly the modalities you're focusing on, Olympic lifting skills, and gymnastic skills, and aerobic capacity. And just, although the test is in some ways unknown and unknowable, you do have a pretty good idea that they're going to test you on a lot of different stuff. You know there's going to be a strength event, there's going to be a long endurance event, and that some athletic skills, like we were talking about Brandon doing the backflip, that somewhere a skill such as that will be tested in a workout somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, with CrossFit's popularity, we've seen a ton of the general public getting involved in it, much more so than any other strength sport, including powerlifting, strongman, weightlifting, even bodybuilding, if we throw that in there. What are the bigger differences that you can see between the training for the people just entering into a local CrossFit box versus people who are actually trying to be competitive at the games level or regional or local level? Because I imagine knowing that the specific things that you're going to be tested at in, a handful of weightlifting events, a handful of gymnastics type events, a couple aerobic based events, how specific do you get in your preparations for the games athletes versus people just going into the local box?
Yeah, that's a big challenge and misconception. The whole competition thing in my eyes is a double-edged sword for CrossFit. It's great. It gives CrossFit a lot of popularity and notoriety and exposure. It certainly grows the sports and opens affiliates and brings new athletes in. But it also starts to create a misconception as to what CrossFit actually is. And if you think back, our owner and founder, Coach Greg Glassman, who, he had a great idea. His idea was to move away from silly, non-functional movements that don't produce results and give people things that are compound and varied, because you're not going to cure metabolic disease with bicep curls. And so, you see, like, you go to the Gold's Gym and you see like somebody who needs to lose 50, 70, 100 pounds just doing things without any intensity, like doing like a bicep curl. You're like, that's silly. You're not going to reduce your body fat or get insulin sensitivity back by doing that. So that's kind of where it came from, is a better way to train and get results. Also taking into account that, most people who do train in general, they don't train hard. So you might as well give them movements that are compound and high powered, because the average person is not going to go in the gym and just smash themselves, right? So that's where CrossFit, by making it a game and by giving people exposure to things that are able to garner high levels of power, those things like results come hand in hand. The competition thing is at a whole nother fucking level. Like that is, you're talking now about the 1% of 1% of people in the world who are trying to become the fittest athletes on earth, when the majority of people are there to lose a couple pounds, to look good and feel good. So if you take the average Joe and you start training them like a CrossFit Games athlete, they're going to get fucked up. They're going to get hurt. They're going to feel like it's too hard and they can't do it. And they're likely to never come back again. And I think that's the misconception that occurs, is they see how CrossFit Games athletes train, the amount of volume and intensity and frequency of training, and they try to give that to the layman. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. Right? You wouldn't give like somebody who's getting into running the world record marathoner's running plan, right? So yeah, I mean, everything at that level is as extreme. If the results are going to be world class, the training has to be extremely severe, and there's a price for that too. Because like I've seen with myself and my wife, like there's a shelf life for being a CrossFit Games athlete. Some have it longer than others if you do it a little bit smarter. Or if you're willing to evolve a little bit in your training, you can make it last a little bit longer. But for the average Joe, it's not an appropriate or sustainable thing for them to like try to train like a CrossFit Games athlete. Chris is talking about like doing the one-arm squat snatches and stuff, and like absolutely, like these movements, they're really fun. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the first place, was like, if your goal is to like lose some weight and just look better and not be in pain, you shouldn't be spending all of your workouts like doing muscle ups and squat snatches. It'll probably give you better results and more longevity if you just hit the foundations and get some good hypertrophy work in there and mix it with conditioning.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points there. One thing that I've seen across a few of our athletes in here who both dabble in powerlifting and CrossFit, the thing that seems the most challenging with CrossFit for the vast majority of people is scaling it to their current abilities, because the nice thing about CrossFit is it includes almost everything, but the bad thing is it almost includes everything. So figuring out those exact dosing and prescription seems fairly challenging for a lot of the local coaches, at least in my experience. Where do you see the biggest obstacles or opportunities for improvement are in terms of CrossFit programming at a general level?
Well, I think in general, people just underestimate the potency of the movements. Like say they're going to do 300 weighted back squats in a workout. You're like, that's probably a little bit much, right? Like in a lot of cases, less is more. And I think people are going to start to understand just the stress response that occurs in training, and they'll be able to modulate it a little bit more to get better bang out of their buck. Just kind of understanding that it doesn't need to be so destructive every day. It doesn't need to be so intense every day. I think they'll either start modulating the total volume of training or the intensity of the training, where every once in a while, athletes will put their foot on the gas pedal, but the majority of training can probably be at 80%, and you won't end up with a lot of these issues like breakdown and overtraining and plateaus and things like that. And that's kind of opened up the space for us, because what we do at Thundrbro is, there's this unexplored space between hypertrophy work, or spending a little bit more time doing hypertrophy work and then mixing it with a little bit of CrossFit, maybe a little bit simpler, meaning not as complex or skill intensive, maybe not as voluminous, and maybe not as just intense and heavy all the time, to allow people to still do it with sustainability. So yeah, I think the smart coaches, and I know a bunch of them are kind of a couple of people that come to mind just off the top of my head is like there's a guy from CrossFit Milford named Jason Leiden, and another one in CrossFit New England, Ben Bergeron, and they both train competitive athletes, but they also understand that the recovery process needs to be understood a little bit better. We can't intensity is not a cure-all. You can't just pour more intensity on it and hope it gets better. You've got to be tactful and intelligent about how you dose it.
Did you hear that? Intensity is not a cure-all.
Yes, I am. You don't need to teach me lessons today.
Oh, he needs to teach you, not me.
Anyway.
Hey, continue.
No, I'm just gonna move on. I kind of take things to a high level with intensity. So yes, and sometimes I push things too far. I think we're all well aware of that. That's Brandon's job, is to try to get me to the minimal effective dose, and where I'm not destroying myself and still getting the results. And that's why he's my coach, So yeah.
Hey, and like I was saying, like every athlete is different. Eric Cressy said something pretty interesting the other day. He was like, the problem with low volume programs is it doesn't take into account that a lot of people just don't work hard. So, some athletes need to be pushed, and sometimes you can modulate that by giving them like a set amount of work. As someone like Chris, who's got the wiring, he's not going to be held back by his mental thresholds. He's going to push himself to physical failure. That's where the coach has to pull the reins back a little bit more, as opposed to the one who's just scared or doesn't want to work hard.
Yeah, there's definitely, if you're a coach, you can't have one set approach to how you deal with people. You've got to understand the different personalities, different physiology, all that sort of stuff. I'm really interested in what does it look like a little bit closer? Obviously, I know you can't detail out exactly what all the different programs that you've got, but conceptually, what would some example week look like with your approach?
Well, the way we put things together depends on what results you want and how fast you want them, right? So, if somebody's like, hey, I'm doing CrossFit and I want to put on some muscle and I'd like to do it fast, what we would probably do with them is just a dedicated hypertrophy program 3 days a week. So we'll say, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're going to do our 90-day Get Huge program, which is a fairly simple template. It kind of draws inspiration from Vince Gironda and the 8x8 method, with shorter rest periods and lots of time under tension. If they wanted those results fast, I'd probably tell them just do those 3 days, eat and rest, and you're going to gain 15 pounds in 3 months. Some people love CrossFit so much that we tell them, okay, do that, but then do some light conditioning on Tuesday and Thursday, or the off days, something that might be regenerative, just to move some blood around so you're still maintaining an aerobic capacity. But those two things are, antagonistic with each other, right? Conditioning is going to be a catabolic thing. So if you're trying to be anabolic, if you're trying to grow, it probably doesn't make sense to do that much cardio. So that would be method one. Method two would just be doing like a hybrid program. And so we use a program called Muscle Anarchy, where we do some more advanced bodybuilding concepts, all with compound functional movements. But this is where we use, things like overload eccentrics, isometrics, drop sets, all different really cool things that I've gotten exposed to in the bodybuilding community. And at the end of each day, we throw in a short, light conditioning workout just for functionality, so you're moving athletically, and to maintain a little capacity. So it kind of front loads hypertrophy work with a little bit of conditioning. And the final way, which is the least intrusive on a CrossFit program, is just finishing workouts with some targeted hypertrophy work. So, for instance, if they're doing a workout in the box in the affiliate, what you do is you take the last 15 or 20 minutes and you pick a couple finishers that can either correlate with the workout you just did, but we like to encourage people to pick body parts or functions that correlate with weaknesses, injuries, or mechanical disadvantages they have, so that now this is more conducive towards just improving their athletic performance, not necessarily aesthetics. So there are lots of different ways to do it, but the bottom line is that you're not always doing something just for speed or for load. You're using tempos, you're doing long sets to failure, you're drawing on, metabolic stress and micro tearing, that type of stuff, to be able to get exposure to it, because when you're moving fast, the muscle isn't under tension very long. So a lot of CrossFitters love moving fast, but there's actually more training effect with regard to hypertrophy in keeping muscles under tension.
Yeah, that's definitely agree with that, and that's something I think you could translate in a number of different ways. The way you've set that up too. If you wanted to have a more strength focused, you're going to do pretty similar sorts of things, but like separating out that the hypertrophy and strength from each other, from your conditioning type work. And I think that's a failure with some of the coaches not understanding that, really thinking that you can get everything all in one approach. If you're going to do your conditioning work and you throw squats in, you're going to get a huge growth stimulus from it. Well, you're not if you're training in a range that, again, is more metabolic, right? You want to take those squats and do that as a separate session or the beginning of a session before you do, something like that. If you want to get more of a strength stimulus, like you can't get all these qualities built in in one type of workout.
Yeah, and the thing about CrossFitting is like there's this mental component too. Like it does build a lot of mental toughness. Your pain thresholds move dramatically, the way you view yourself, and I think the biggest adaptation is between the years. But at the same time, people get addicted to the intensity. Maybe it's the endorphins. They like embrace the pain, but those two things are kind of like antithetical to each other, right? Like conditioning and hypertrophy are going to be a compromise. It's just understanding what does that compromise look like. And so what we try to do is balance the scales a little bit more towards muscle growth while we're still giving people their cookie. They're still getting to do some thrusters and burpees, but they're not doing so much that it's going to inhibit their ability to grow or, you suppress their hormones because it's just way too much and they can't recover. So I think that's where coaches are going to start to get smarter about that stuff. But
I can tell you for a fact, thrusters and burpees is not my cookie.
Oh yeah,
you couldn't feed me enough cookies to go do that.
And people are mental cases. They're so scared of losing their capacity, and even the aesthetic part of it. Like they want to condition because they're afraid they're going to get fat, but I tell folks like, hey, if you have abs, if you can see your abs, you're good on the conditioning, right? Like you don't need to worry about losing body fat right now. I can see your fucking abs. Let's make you bigger because you're a 6 foot tall, 170 pound dude with a lot of room to grow. So I
otherwise you're going to
part of that for people is letting go.
Yeah, you're gonna end up just doing just that, is hitting that stalling point, and just like you're going to sit there doing the same workout, doing the same thing for 6 years and not really get any more conditioned. You're not going to get any stronger. You're just going to hit that point where it's a wall and you're just really not moving anywhere.
Yeah. Actions in the gym should reflect your goals. And like, people do this all the time. They compromise what they want right now versus what they want long-term. Become victims to themselves. They give into their ego.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about people from other sports transitioning into CrossFit and how that and what that process is like. We've had quite a few people coming over from CrossFit into strength sports or into more specific strength sports in powerlifting and strongman, et cetera. And one thing that we have to really nail down with them from an expectation standpoint is variety is going to be tremendously lower now that you're doing powerlifting or strongman. Like you only have maybe 3 or 4 lifts that you need to get really, really good at. Whereas in CrossFit, we're doing tons of things. So expectations has to change dramatically. With the other way, people going into CrossFit from other sports, where do you find you have to set expectations for them, or how can you mentally prepare them for the transition into such a different modality of training?
Well, I think there's a bunch of things in there. Let's start with your first statement about like the athletes from CrossFit filtering into specific disciplines. Like how much has powerlifting changed in the past couple of years? I mean, when I was growing up, powerlifters looked like potatoes. And now you've got this like athletic body type looking powerlifter. And dude, the chicks, are you fucking kidding me? You got these like hot babes lifting all this weight. It's insane. And I think what's happening is, whether it be powerlifting or Olympic lifting, I think those are the two most popular ones, is that people are getting exposed to these disciplines through CrossFit.
Absolutely. I think the growth in both weightlifting and powerlifting is definitely tied to the growth in CrossFit. Yeah, it's insane.
It's saved USA weightlifting. I mean, we were at the American Open, and it was as big as it's ever been in its history, and like 99% of people in there were either exposed to it or lift in a CrossFit gym. So I think what's happening is these people are getting exposed to the disciplines. And maybe they can't cut it in CrossFit. They're competitive people and they're talented, but CrossFit is very hard. There's so many things to be good at. So, you get a chick who's gifted, but maybe it's a little too hard to be good at everything. So they filter into a specific sport like Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting, and now they're becoming superstars, which is really fucking cool. But I think like it's opened the door to revitalize interest in these sports, which are, I mean, let's be honest. It's like bowling, dude. Like nobody cared about Olympic lifting in America before CrossFit started coming around, and now it's kind of introduced this lifeblood into it where there's renewed vigor, and you're seeing it's everywhere. It's on TV. It's like it's really fucking cool. For athletes who come from other sports, you got to be a little more specific, because we train athletes who are sport-specific athletes in CrossFit to be better at their sport. But the understanding is that CrossFit is the base. It's general physical preparedness. So the idea here is to be not so sport-specific, but to just kind of build a base of functional capacities, not nearly as extreme as like you would do with a games athlete. But let's be honest, like any professional athlete should be able to run a mile pretty well. Any professional athlete should be able to back squat 2 times their body weight. So that's kind of where the scope of it is within sport-specific training. But most of the games athletes at CrossFit Games are former athletes in different sports: baseball, a couple football, a lot of soccer. For the girls, it's a lot of track and gymnastics. And I think that competitive mindset lends itself so well, because you get done with a sport. And it's like, you ever seen Zoolander before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where he walks outside and he looks in the puddle and he's like, who am I? Well, that's what it's like when you're done with your sport. You're like, who the fuck am I? Like, why would I train? Like, what's my purpose now? And CrossFit was a way to feel like an athlete again. You're not just going to the gym and mulling around for the sake of mulling around, but there's a purpose. You're competing against yourself. You're competing in the class. And I think that attracts athletes and just a competitive mindset in general.
Yeah, I think that's actually
It's a pretty accurate statement. So, I see that. I love watching the games every year. By the way, because it's just incredible what those athletes at that level are doing. And it's always entertaining. And then you find out their different backgrounds and stuff as well.
It's scary. Like this started. I mean, I was at like the second CrossFit Games, and it was in Dave Castro's backyard. And we were lifting weights in the dirt, and doing pull-ups on a homemade pull-up rig. And every year it's gotten exponentially bigger and more competitive. With the exception of this year, there's been a bit of a diminishment of the games, but not the talent of the athletes. It's just they've kind of changed the structure and pivoted more towards health with CrossFit in general instead of pushing the competition thing, because I think they're trying to redefine the company a little bit. But, the influx of new athletes, the development of the athletes that are already in there, understanding how to train better. And, I'm going to be controversial here. Yeah, they're getting better at using drugs too. I have no idea what the limit is. I think we're going to see insane things at the CrossFit Games in the future.
Yeah, it's really cool to see what people can accomplish, like in variety of disciplines, when it becomes something that somebody can do for a job and have that much focus on. And you can just see how far it can go. Yeah, that's yeah. Well, actually, but that makes for an entertaining conversation, because this all got our podcast got started off of me reposting a meme and then you reposting it, right? And
I love it.
And your question was really, really valid, and I was actually posing it to Brandon. I won't tell you which Brandon, because earlier today. But the question was, hey, what? Maybe I'll state this wrong, but what could a CrossFitter beat a powerlifter at in a strength type event? Obviously, yes. A powerlifter is going to get destroyed in any sort of thing that's going to have some sort of metabolic overhead, hanging, a whole lot of things like that. Just no joke about it. But I thought some of the comments on it were pretty hilarious, because people that weren't familiar with powerlifters were like, "Oh, I'd like to see him compete against this person. They can deadlift 600 pounds.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. Oh, let's see you try to. Right. Let's see you try to deadlift 225 for 25 reps." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, you guys just have no clue." Like, because when we in those areas that we specialize in, we're like off the charts for those sorts of things that the normal person isn't going to have any ability to comprehend. That everybody in that meme was a 900 plus pound deadlifter. That 600 pound deadlift is like nothing.
It was so funny. The thing that pissed me off the most is they're answering the question, but they didn't read the question.
Oh yeah.
I was very specific. I even defined what a strength based event was. And they were like, "I'd like to see him do Murph." And like the point is, it's highlighting the price of specialization. Yep. And being a CrossFit athlete is being specialized. There's a price to specializing in CrossFit. Oh, yeah. Yep. You're never going to be the best at any one thing.
Nope.
But the point with that was to actually challenge people to think a little bit of what. And you're totally right. Their perspective, their world is so confined to CrossFit that the idea of a 900-pound deadlift is inconceivable.
Yep.
Right. And
I love that. I love the 225 for 20 because I think I linked to that guy. I'm like, here's me doing 220 or 675 for 20. Okay.
Yes.
But you had one, and I honestly don't know the answer to it. Was who would, and again, max effort, be the best at like doing a weighted pull up.
Yeah.
And I'm
exactly.
I think it would go back and forth like constantly. And I think there's a lot of those things because that is a pure like display of physical strength. But, powerlifters don't train that, axis of movement very often. And some of them probably aren't good in being in that position. So I think there's definitely some things. And you were, like I said, trying to get people to think. There wasn't a lot of thinking going on there. But it was an interesting mental challenge. So I still wondering who would be better at doing max effort or close to max effort pull-ups. I have no idea. We're not talking repetition because repetition powerlifter get like destroyed. So
well, if it's weighted, I've seen and I forget who it was. I want to say it was Blaine Sumner doing weighted pull-ups with like 3 45-pound plates attached to him, and that's a 400-pound.
And he's a 400-pound person. Yeah.
So I have to say that one of those super heavyweight guys, like I think Doyle comes to mind as someone who would be able to do that.
Yeah.
Like one of the big super heavies in powerlifting, I think has to take it because I don't think there's too many lightweight people attaching 300-pound. Maybe there is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there is.
So, the mark for, and I love researching this stuff because like what you do in CrossFit is you go to a specialty and you figure out like what's the mark for elite in that specialty, right? Like if I'm a power lifter, like what's the mark for an elite deadlift? And then you use that as a reference to kind of aim for, right? So in gymnastics, a person who can do a double body weight pull-up is considered elite. So for a male gymnast, if you weigh, 180 pounds and you can put an additional 180 pounds on you, now you've reached the elite category. Now, obviously, that's a strength to body weight ratio, right? So we're not talking about just absolute weight. And I think anything strength to body weight ratio outside the scope of bench, squat, deadlift will probably be fair game for the generalist to try to beat the specialist.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
What can you do, Brandon? I feel like you could do a really heavy pull.
We're going to have to experiment after this.
I've gotten right around 3 plates, but it was an ugly rep.
Ugly reps are the best reps.
We're not counting that.
Hashtag CrossFit.
As I said,
Just kidding.
So hey, Beefcake Brandon. I'm sorry, not to insult the regular brand, but Beefcake Brandon. So like, give me an idea.
I demand that you insult the regular brand.
Well, I demand that you insult him back then.
What? Just to give us an idea, like what is your bench press, give or take? Like what are you pushing?
With the 1 count pause. Powerlifting
Best all time.
with powerlifting
Heaviest weight.
rules.
Let's just call it a legit bench press where it's not bouncing and you're locking it out.
Touch and go.
About 465.
Okay, 465. So pretty good. What do you weigh?
220 right now.
Okay, nice. So like pretty damn good for a 220-pound dude to be starting to get towards like a 500-pound bench press, right? So I know you mentioned you do these challenges. We just threw out a challenge. And this was kind of fun because we threw it out to everyone in the world, not just CrossFitters, to throw like one of those medium stretch bands around their back. And, I did it with one of my buddies who I trained with who is a 500-pound bench presser. And what you do is you do 1 push-up into a 1-second hold halfway through the range of motion, and then 2 reps into a 2-second hold halfway through the range of motion, all the way up to 10. Nobody in the fucking world could complete that. It blew my mind, dude. I think you could do it. We got to get you a band right now. You got to hop on the floor, and we got to make you do this, dude. Because, this is what I love is, the crossover between specialties is, maybe a CrossFitter can't do it. But I guarantee you, there's a power lifter out there who maybe has some kind of niche that can, it's an inspiration. It's a mark to work towards. And something like that, like a 500-pound bench press for most people is not accessible, but doing a push-up certainly is, right?
Yeah.
So I love these things where hey, what's your, 1 rep max weighted push-up on a barbell? It's great just to give people respect of the capacities of people who dedicate their lives to developing just a single type of capacity.
Absolutely. So you got your next challenge, Kronk.
Right? Yeah, I'm definitely interested. I want to try it now. I want to at least
You
see
gotta
it
be
first.
legit,
But
dude. You gotta lock out your arms.
That's why I don't bench press anymore. They don't do that anymore. So
It's too much calcium in the elbows.
You drank too much milk as a child.
yeah, there is too much bone in
lot
there,
of,
and too little bone.
A lot of goat milk, I hear.
I like goat milk. It's tasty. Doesn't like my stomach so much though.
Well, guys, do you have anything else you want to ask Dave? We're about running up on time here.
I think we covered a lot of ground. So yeah, I really enjoy it. So.
So, obviously, like I got to talk a lot about CrossFit and what we do, just to give you guys, and I've seen what you've been doing, like, secondhand. But I met a couple guys from Kabuki at one of the NSCA conferences. And one of the things I love that you guys tap into that not every powerlifting gym or community is just physiology and orthopedics and spine health and positioning. And I know you guys work pretty tightly with Dr. McGill. I think that is super cool because for somebody who's sustained back injuries for so long, like I wish I had that when I was growing up, right? Like just like somebody to be like, you're gonna fuck yourself up, dude.
Trust me, I've been training. I've been training for 30 years, and anybody that follows me knows I've got a multitude of past history of injuries, and that information wasn't available when we were younger. It just wasn't there. And so what we've been trying to do is, collect and align, those right people to develop our philosophy. And it's really interesting because, we're both an education company and an equipment company, but it's in our mind, education first. And so our equipment is all an output of that. So it's very specialty stuff. All built around human biomechanics, being able to get us into better positions, get the joints in better positions, be able to manage spinal mechanics. And it's something that's missing because we have just been stuck with this, hey, we all train with a barbell because that's what it is. And it's like, well, that's not the best tool for every movement. And it's certainly not the best tool for every athlete, depending on what their mobility restrictions are, their individual biomechanics, their past injury histories, like all this sort of stuff you got to tap into. You're an ex-ball player. We work extensively throughout Major League Baseball now with our equipment because of these reasons where, we can bring in a piece of a tool and help the coaches be able to preserve the longevity of their athletes while still getting stronger and more resilient by taking away the negative stressors of like, hey, guess what? Squatting with a straight bar puts a huge external rotational demand on the shoulder, huge demand on the bicep tendon insertion. And hey, if we're lacking any of those things, it shoots us into extension, and now we've got a compromised ability to brace, and thus a compromised ability. Now we've got compromised spinal mechanics and potential for risk injury, like all these things. Like, I just want somebody squatting to get stronger, right?
Yeah. And for professional athletes like baseball players, like the risk is high, right? For the average Joe, if they hurt their shoulder or tweak their knee, like, all right, whatever, I'll go get some surgery, I'll lose 6 months. For a baseball player, that's catastrophic.
Yeah, that's their career or their life that they've been working for. Like, it's everything.
And from an organizational standpoint, that's also catastrophic financially. Mm-hmm. Mike Trout hurts his back deadlifting stupid. Like, that's fucking millions of dollars down the tube.
Yep.
And baseball's come a long way because their solution to that previously was to do nothing. was to be as archaic and conservative with training as possible.
But then you're not building resilience into your athletes, and you've got a whole nother set of problems. Yeah,
the whole concept of being anti-fragile. You treat yourself fragile, you will become fragile.
Yep.
So there has to be, now baseball is getting better, and what I've noticed just in the past couple of years is they've just started integrating like trap bar deadlifts. That's it. They started doing some trap bar deadlifts and some medicine ball tosses and a little bit of like overhead work. And now the 99 miles an hour is the average, right? Like, just by doing a minimal amount of compound legitimate strength work, not even just with a trap bar, has brought us so far. Like, where it's going to go, I don't even know, but there's so much room for growth in that. It's just understanding where that risk reward is for those ball players. But I mean, you could get injured just as easily on a field as you can in the weight room. For some reason, it's just way more acceptable to get injured on the field, and it's so disastrous to get injured in the weight room. But I mean, in my mind, it's the same thing,
Yeah. So thanks for that. I mean, obviously, I think our fan base is pretty familiar with what we do, but it's good things to point on, and I think there's a huge opportunity for taking that focus. And actually, it's a good point there. So we just started distributing through Rogue again as well, the beginning of this month. So Bill and Katie have been pushing us to bring their product line back through Rogue. So hopefully we can start getting a little bit more awareness through the CrossFit community about some of the tools and things that we do and help people out.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like, it almost makes me angry that people in CrossFit aren't getting exposure to Dr. McGill. Because they need it. They need it more than anybody. I mean, the CrossFit affiliate is a gold mine for orthopedic surgeons.
Well, here's the issue. I mean, this is where we balance, and I kind of talked about balancing where you put your strength, your hypertrophy, and your metabolic conditioning work, right? Because if you're doing like basic core loaded movements as part of your Metcon, you're going to fatigue, right? The respiratory fatigue, your metabolic demands are going to be high. Well, that's consuming the same resource that is used for stabilizing the spine. So if you're doing overhead squats to failure, once you start fatiguing, you're losing the ability to resource embrace, and even if it's not a heavy weight, you lose it, you're going to lose the ability to control your spinal position, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get injured, but it certainly ramps that risk for injury through the roof. So
and when you're talking about the risk reward, maybe for the average young collegiate athlete who's just out of college, that's not as much of a concern. But how about grandma? What does that mean if grandma gets hurt? She's done. She's never training again. I think
that's where it's
going to get smart about understanding the context.
Yeah, you've got to be. That's why you got to be cognizant of programming. I mean, that is, a huge impact on injuries. Is that more than most people think? They all think it's an accident, not moving well, whatever it is. But the underlying causes a lot of times are just poor programming choices.
Yeah, and sometimes that is something that just is not communicated as well to coaches and athletes. When they see a workout, it's understanding what should this workout actually look like, because it shouldn't look like a car accident.
Yes, you should be leaving feeling refreshed and better and ready for the next day because you're coming back tomorrow. So
it's the same thing. We talk about that with people because as soon as you start giving CrossFitters the hypertrophy work, it's the same mental thing. I'm like, you should not be sore for a week. You should be a little bit sore, but you're not going to remodel the way you should. You're going to become catabolic if you just destroy yourself every day like that. So, people are going to get smarter, but hopefully we can, be on the front of bringing things to light and finding other really smart people in our community. Like I was telling you about Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, who's like a huge inspiration to me. And popularizing them in a community that their content, their information is extremely valuable, right? Like we're talking about about McGill, like his stuff is valuable. People need to know about it. It's just who's going to bring that in.
Yeah. Well, if you've got recommendation, I think I've reached out to Brad about being on our podcast before, and I'm not sure if I've got a response, but he's been on my to-do list to get on our podcast. So
he's great. You're gonna have to dumb down his language for the masses for sure, because he's got one of those brains that the brain is working faster than the mouth can move, so it just comes out so fast. You got to have your dictionary out for some of the things he says, but it's gold. It's all gold.
Well, we gotta wrap up because we gotta get this posted in less than an hour at length, so we can get it on Instagram as well. So where can Dave? Where can people find you, Thundrbro, all that sort of stuff at? So social media, website, all that stuff.
On Instagram, you can find me at Dave Freakin Lipson or our company at Thundrbro. All the links in our bio go to our training library or our website, our online program. And, one of the things I always tell people is that, if you have questions about this stuff, DM me. I'm really happy. I'm pretty good at responding. And if I don't know the answer, I could probably point you in the right direction. That's all where you guys can find me.
All right.
All right. Hey, thank you guys so much. Brandon, I got to see that video, dude. I want to see the video. You're getting all the way up to 10.
I'm going to give it a shot.
Nice. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
All right.
Later.
Bye.